PowerCat Game Day Sunday post game. Corey Dean, John Kurtz, Cole Manbeck in the house, and another heartbreaker for K-State as they lose on a last-second field goal to Baylor in Waco, a game that started out rainy on the field and ended up gloomy for all the K-State fans. Gentlemen, this was a tale of two halves yet again. I think John said partway through the game on Twitter that, hey, I've already seen the Oklahoma State game. I don't need to see it again. And that was really what this one felt like. Great performance in the first half. K-State's defense is kind of on fire. Second half, no answer really for Baylor as they storm back. Was there any question in your mind, John, when Baylor got the ball back there at the end of the game with the chance to drive down for the field goal, that that's exactly what was going to happen?
It definitely started to feel very inevitable. I mean, you can rewind it back to, things started to go downhill after Sebastian Taylor's 15-yard penalty that helped set up Baylor with some better field position on the kickoff. I think really when you started to feel it more was Khalid Duke's penalty, which is a really tough one because he's diving at the quarterback and it's a hit below the knees is what the call is, and it really was slightly above the knees. I mean, that was really tough, but that's kind of football in 2020, and then you don't get a stop. And that offensive series that K-State had the last time the offense touched the ball obviously was pretty bad. And Chris Kleiman said after the game that basically Will Howard should have kept it on a read on the first down play. Maybe that would have changed some things, but I know that just brings to a head everybody's frustrations about the play calling on offense and what the offense is. And look, that's a tough one to defend. It was not a very good series at all. And the defense, just the way things were going in the second half, you knew that there wasn't going to be a way that they were going to be able to stop Baylor. And even then you get teased with it, that you almost do with the fumble that pops out and winds up getting overturned. So it was about as painful, I guess, long story short, about as painful as it possibly could have been down the stretch there as a 9-point lead evaporated pretty quickly in the last 4 or 5 minutes. And it's just really disheartening. To me, that was the toughest loss of the season to take, and it's not particularly close. I know Oklahoma State was one that sucked as well, but because of the opponent, because you had really been dominating the game, because of the way that it came unraveled at the end, to me, it was more painful than Will Howard's fumble 6 against Oklahoma State, just the series and sequence of events that happened. And just knowing that this team so badly needed the losing streak to stop so that you're not heading into the offseason on a 5-game losing streak for so many reasons. That to me was the most gut-wrenching loss of the season.
Yeah, that one definitely stung last night. That's putting it lightly. K-State, it felt similar to Oklahoma State in the sense that Kansas State dominated the first half and probably should have been up more than the 11 points they were up. But still, I went into halftime thinking, guys, if Kansas State scores another touchdown in the second half, that'll probably be enough with the way Baylor's offense looked in the first half. I just thought K-State needed one more score to make it a 3-score game. Now, eventually Baylor cuts it to 17-15, but once K-State got it out to 24-15 with the big plays, the 2-play drive to Briley Moore and then the Will Howard run, I felt decent, but then the defense let him go right back down the field again for a touchdown. Then the K-State offense responds with a quick 3 or 4 play drive for a touchdown. I'm thinking, okay, now the defense will step up. They let him go down the field again for a touchdown. And to me, that's what was very disheartening, because if you look at the numbers, I mean, Baylor's a top 40 unit defensively in the country. I mean, that's kind of been their calling card. And while I've been very critical of the offense, and 88 passing yards isn't good enough, they have to be much better than that. And they turned the ball over twice. That's not good. But K-State ran the ball for 256 yards and averaged 7.3 yards per carry. That's by far and away more than any team has done to Baylor all year. And so when you see those numbers, you think K-State has a good shot to win, and the offense puts up 31 points, and yet they end up losing the game to a Baylor offense that came into the game ranked 107th in the country at 1.6 points per drive. In the second half, Baylor scored on 5 of their 6 possessions and averaged 4.3 points per drive. And that to me was disheartening, is that Charlie Brewer, completed the highest completion percentages of his entire career in that game. Baylor passing attack has been, mediocre to below average all year. And K-State's defense never really adjusted in that second half and just continued to give up passes over the middle. And John, you mentioned it. I mean, there were some bad breaks there. I mean, the Khalid Duke play obviously hurt big time. I mean, they would have been at 4th and 8 at the Baylor 27 trying to kick either a 45-yard field goal to make it a 6-point game with, less than 7 minutes left, or they're trying to go for it. If they don't get it, K-State's probably going to win that game. And then you think you have a fumble recovery, and it obviously gets overturned. And that kick return by Malik Knowles that set K-State up inside its own 15, I kind of started to get a sinking feeling on that last drive with less than 3 minutes when I saw the field position they were in and seeing how they would call the plays. And at the end of the day, I just, probably a lack of trust in a true freshman quarterback backed up there to do anything but hand it off the first couple plays. But yeah, a little more creativity probably would have been nice, because you had a sense that if Baylor got the ball back, they would win.
Yeah, we've kind of seen several games now where, K-State kind of really is not able to make the adjustments that they would like to necessarily be able to change things up in the second half to kind of get momentum back, if you will. 6 sacks in the first half, and then almost no quarterback pressure after halftime. And most of Baylor's passing yards comes all in the second half, as Cole mentioned, John. Was there any kind of mention after the game of what really changed there? Because I thought that really defined the first half, as how well K-State was getting after the quarterback. Probably one of their best defensive performances for the first half. And then the switch was just flipped, and it was like you couldn't get pressure on Brewer at all after halftime.
Yeah, I asked Chris Kleiman what changed in the second half defensively. I mean, the only thing he was saying was tackling, and he reiterated that a couple of times, that the tackling was the main issue. I know Wyatt Hubert had mentioned that Baylor started going to some screens and quicker hitting stuff that eliminated some of the pass rush and made it more difficult for them to tee off, and that there was an adjustment there. Baylor was also using Brewer's legs to run a decent amount, and so I think that stymied some of that. Obviously, you think about early on in the game, the quarterback draw a touchdown that he had, but there were other opportunities there for him to take off and run, and he really did. So, I mean, I think there were some adjustments there from Baylor, but it is frustrating that multiple times this year now, it seems like the third quarter has just been a total death knell for the team. I was trying to think beyond just Oklahoma State and Baylor, and Cole, maybe you can help me out here. TCU was the third quarter pretty bad. It felt like there's another game or two this year where it's been rough, but I know everybody, I say everybody, a lot of fans on Twitter I know are always asking us, like, hey, ask these guys about the third quarter, It's been asked a couple of times before the Baylor game, and one of the corrections that was shot right back from Courtney Messingham was, well, I mean, the third quarter was where we dominated Kansas. You have to be careful with some of that. And I started looking back, and I was like, okay, well, wait, what games is it here that the third quarter has really been that much of an issue? Are they just standing out in our mind because there were two that were so bad? But I don't know.
West Virginia, Oklahoma State, both no points in the third quarter. And then, of course, this Baylor game, no points in the third quarter. Iowa State, no points in the game. So that one really doesn't count.
Right. That was the problem. I started looking back. It's like Iowa State, everything was bad. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's something specific going on there. Obviously, I'm sure it's something internally that they're thinking about and looking at, but there wasn't a whole lot of mention in the post-game press conference as to what happened there. But I would also guess that the defense just was kind of worn down by the end of the game. It just looked like they were gassed. There wasn't quite as much energy out there, and a lot of things really added up.
So, Cole, you mentioned a little bit about kind of the play calling on that last drive, but at the same time, K-State rushes for, I mean, what I would think was its best day, and 250 yards rushing and actually kind of get crushed a little bit in time of possession as well. And this was coming in a K-State team that was going to be shorthanded on the offensive line, but they obviously had success running the football. 7 yards a carry is just crazy. How do you not transform that into something that's a little bit more effective on offense there towards the very end of the game?
That's a great question. I mean, I thought the offensive line played really well, especially down your two starting offensive guards. I thought Taylor Portier really stepped up, played well. And then they slid Cooper Beebe, redshirt freshman who's been starting at right tackle. They slid him inside, which is really his more natural position at guard. And I think he'll be an all-conference type player. And I thought that really opened up some holes in the running game and really off at the end there when Baylor gets a sense that they just got to get one stop. They've got some momentum on their side. They feel like if they get that stop, they're going to have good field position, potentially win the game. I think Baylor's defense kind of just woke up at that point and keyed in on Deuce Vaughn and just really looked to take away the run. And again, that's probably to Chris Kleiman's first point. I haven't rewatched the game, and it'd be too painful probably too, but I would guess they really were keying in on Deuce Vaughn on that last series. That if Will Howard does keep the ball, there's a chance that there might be a big play there. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But yeah, I think it was really just a matter of Baylor's defense, waking up, playing with some energy there at the end. And, like I said, they've been a decent defense all year. Dave Aranda is a really good defensive coordinator. So you knew they would probably adjust. And just in that crucial situation, K-State, couldn't get the ball moving, couldn't get that first down. And they were going to need, if we're being honest, they were going to need at least a couple first downs to melt that clock because Baylor had all of its timeouts. And so not just one first down wouldn't have done it, but it certainly would have helped to get one and get off your own, inside the 15-yard line and move the field position back a little bit. So yeah, that one definitely hurt. I will say, guys, you talked about the third quarter. K-State's been outscored 35-0 over the last 4 games in the third quarter. And they also didn't score in the third quarter against TCU. The defense had the pick 6, and they didn't score against Arkansas State in the third quarter. So 6 of the 9 games, they went scoreless in the third quarter. The Texas Tech game, they only had a field goal. So 7 of the 9 games, no touchdowns in that third quarter. Only the KU and Oklahoma games did K-State's offense really do anything in the third.
Well, that would seem to be a trend then. Yeah. So with one game to get home, and it's a Texas Longhorns team who are coming off a loss to Iowa State as the Cyclones knock off Texas, and kind of paving their way, at least apparently paving their way to the Big 12 title game potentially against OU. Texas comes in. It seems like both yesterday and forever ago when this team had 4 straight wins in conference and was in the top 20, and then just kind of the wheels have completely come off at this point. And I kind of tend to agree with John. It's like, it's the Oklahoma State game is kind of a fluke, but then the last 2, you get absolutely dominated by Iowa State. And then when you think you have a chance to get a win, you get your heart broken in Waco. You finally get to come back home. But this would seem to probably be a pretty motivated Texas team, and a game that on paper, certainly Texas is going to be favored. This has been a bizarre season, everything else, but you still have a chance to win one at home. Do you see an opportunity against Texas, or is this one probably going to be too tough a mountain to climb as you head for the final game of the year?
I don't think it's fair to say like it would be too tough of a mountain to climb. I think there's a chance. I think a lot of it will depend on what Texas team actually shows up, like how motivated are they, because they're not going to the Big 12 championship game. So how much does that actually factor into things here? Like they had a particularly brutal loss themselves this week. That they should not have lost that game against Iowa State at all. And now Tom Herman is going to be totally under fire. I already saw in his post-game press conference, he's being asked, like, are you the right guy for the job? The Texas media has been pretty harsh with him. So it's, do you get a team that's playing for their coach, or do you get a team that realizes now that, the significant carrot that they still had dangling out there for most of the year, even after a rough start, is now pretty much gone? I guess I say they're out. I don't know. I saw ESPN flash up the graphic of who has a chance to make the Big 12 championship game. It was Oklahoma, and Iowa State. So I assume that they're pretty much mathematically eliminated. So yeah, I think that to me is what it all is. Like, we'll see what the weather's going to be, but typically like a cold December game in Manhattan doesn't work out really well for Texas in terms of being a motivated team and wanting to be there and play that game. And now the way their season has come undone the way that it did against Iowa State. I think that's a legitimate question. K-State's found a way to play with teams, found a way to play with Oklahoma State not that long ago with a still pretty depleted roster. I would imagine and hope, knock on wood, that nobody else goes out, but I would think that you're probably getting back Justin Hughes and Elijah Sullivan at linebacker. That'll at least help out some. Like, I think there's a path there, but it's what kind of an opponent are you going to get in Texas? Because if Texas does want to show up and be pretty motivated, then that's going to be a tall task.
Yeah, like you, John, I think it's where Texas heads at, and very similar outcome as you mentioned, the Iowa State game. They completely dominated Iowa State. They led that game for 58 plus minutes, and they lose the lead at the very end of the game. Tom Herman made some really atrocious coaching decisions throughout. I mean, I saw they had the ball. I watched the whole game, but they had the ball in Iowa State territory 8 of their 10 possessions, and yet they only scored 20 points. Just some really bad decision making that came back to bite them. And so I don't know where Texas heads will be. You mentioned the weather, John. A December game in Manhattan. If it's going to be cold, Texas not playing for a Big 12 title anymore. Are they really motivated at this point, or are they just ready to kind of end the season? Move on to whatever bowl game that might be that they would play in. Who knows how that'll work. And the same thing for K-State. I mean, this has been a long, grueling road for all these players in college football with the pandemic. And are they just ready to get it over with? I'm not saying these guys are going to completely quit, but I could see why it would be mentally challenging for these guys to bounce back on the heels of a 4-game losing streak, playing a Texas team in Manhattan with limited fan support in terms of capacity, not a lot of energy being brought, obviously, by fans because you're having 10,000 people in there at most. How do you kind of lift your spirits and get up for that game when all it means is the difference between 4-6 and 5-5? I don't know. I mean, obviously you don't want to end the year on a 5-game losing streak, but at the same time, I just wonder if these guys are ready for it to end and just hope that 2021 is a brand new year that gets much better and everything gets back to normal with, COVID, and we can hopefully put that behind us and a vaccines on the market. Maybe these guys are just ready to call it. Some guys might check out a little bit, and I couldn't blame them necessarily because it's been a challenging year.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you could kind of read it on the players and coaches' faces after the game was over. I mean, this has just been a long haul. The uncertainty of who's going to be able to play and who's not going to be able to play, and if games are happening and if games are not happening. And I think it's been rough. And then you add the losses on top of that, losing your starting quarterback and Skylar Thompson, like all of those things. I mean, it's a lot.
Well,
it's a lot.
The one thing I'll say, Corey, is, I mean, who would have ever thought when this thing started in August in these conversations that we would actually get to this point, right? And so that's a credit to the Big 12, and it's big for Kansas State and all these Big 12 schools that they've gotten so many of these games in from a TV dollar standpoint. I mean, you're talking about schools, seeming like they're going to have to borrow money to, getting, it looks like all 10 games in. So Kansas State hasn't had a game, knock on wood, canceled yet this year. So that's a credit to everybody for able to get through that. I mean, at the end of the day, I was very frustrated last night. I've been frustrated with multiple games this year, obviously, but at the end of the day, just to get a college football season in, I am grateful for. I love the sport. And, it was very uplifting to at least have football to watch these last few months. So appreciate all the guys and the coaches for getting through it. And, at least we made it here.
I think that's well said. So Cole's obviously already in Chiefs mode. He's got his gear on, ready. What game are you more excited for today? Chiefs and Bucks, Mahomes and Brady, or the fact that Denver has to play with no quarterback due to losing all 4 of their quarterbacks to COVID? They're going to start a practice squad wide receiver at quarterback who didn't even finish the year at quarterback for Wake Forest when he graduated. I'm all in on the no quarterback bowl. But I can see where Mahomes Brady tonight on Sunday Night Football is going to be pretty damn entertaining too.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously as a Chiefs fan, I'm going to be more interested in that, but I am intrigued by what's going to happen with Denver. I don't. Is that in the early window? What time is that game at?
No, 3.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely be interested in watching that. The most interested I've been in watching a Broncos game all year, to be honest. But I love that storyline. It's wild that the NFL is making them play under those circumstances. Because it feels like with the NFL, for the most part, things have been pretty normal. You haven't seen the massive COVID hits that we've seen in college football with some of these teams having to go out there and play with skeleton crews like we've seen K-State have to do a couple of times. So, yeah, I'll be very interested in that. But, man, I definitely am here for Mahomes v. Brady. Definitely am here for what the Chiefs are doing right now. And, after the way that they won last time out, I'm certainly feeling pretty confident and cocky these days about the Chiefs.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching the Broncos game. I haven't checked the guide, but we'll see if we get it. Corey, the Chiefs play at 3:25 or are they Sunday night? Do I need to recheck my schedule?
I think they're the night game, aren't they?
I can't keep track of.
Oh no, they're 325. You're right. The night game is the Bears and the Packers because everyone wants to watch that game.
Yeah. Well, I only ask because things get shifted around so much nowadays. It's impossible to keep track. I want to make sure, but yeah. So the Chiefs game I'll be looking forward to. I think that'll be an interesting game. The Buccaneers coming off a loss, so we'll see if the Chiefs can get some pressure on Tom Brady. Obviously, he has a lot of weapons at the receiver position. At the end of the day, I think they'll win, but I think it'll be a very competitive game. And then the Broncos game. I mean, it could work. I mean, you don't see that's unique to the NFL. You don't see this thrown out there. It's kind of a one-day notice to the Saints. How does that affect their preparation and going into the game? I mean, maybe it'll be like the Colin Klein Texas game where in 2010, where they throw the ball 3 or 4 times and gouge the Saints in the running game. I don't know. The Saints have a pretty good defense, but and I'm sure they'll adjust. But I would like to watch it.
Well, I'm not a betting guy. You guys are, but the line went from 6.5 points to 16.5 points overnight.
Yeah, imagine if you'd gotten on that line early, how great you'd be feeling when the news came out yesterday. If you got that 6.5, because they can't pull it off, they can't cancel and refund your bet in that situation. So yeah, you'd be feeling pretty good. So
unreal. All right, well, 1 week to go, which seems kind of weird. This season seems both forever and very short all at the same time. So I think that's kind of where all of COVID is. So, all right, gentlemen, enjoy your games. Everybody try to stay healthy, wash your hands, stay indoors, all that good stuff. We got one more week of this to knock down, and we will see you guys next weekend. Hopefully after a win over Texas, that would help right the ship a little bit. So send those K-State fans out after senior day with a victory would be awfully nice. We will catch up with you in a week.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Corey.